I still remember the first time I realized there was something different about the way I looked at Dr. Alvarez during our shifts together. He wasn't like the other physicians, the ones who barked orders or treated us nurses like background noise. He had this calm confidence, the kind that filled the room without pushing anyone else out. That night shift had started like any other, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of antiseptic clinging to the halls, monitors beeping in every room. And yet, it felt charged somehow, like the atmosphere itself was aware of the two of us circling each other. It was just after 7 p.m., when we admitted our first trauma of the night, a young man with a deep laceration across his arm from a construction accident. Dr. Alvarez walked in, pulling on gloves, and instead of just telling me what to do, he caught my eyes and said, "We'll handle this together." That word, "we," stuck with me. I held pressure while he stitched, and the whole time he talked me through each step, even though I already knew what to do. It wasn't about teaching. It was about connection, making me feel like an equal instead of a subordinate. When we finished and wheeled the patient off for imaging, I noticed he lingered a moment longer than necessary, his shoulder brushing mine as he leaned past me to discard his gloves. That tiny contact sent a jolt through me. The hours ticked by, the ward buzzing with the usual chaos. But every time I passed him in the hallway, every time our eyes met across the nurses' station, there was this unspoken thread pulling tight. Around midnight, when the ER briefly slowed, I found him leaning against the counter, scribbling notes. I teased him about his handwriting, which was notoriously illegible, and he chuckled, shaking his head. "Guess that's why I need you around," he said softly, and for a moment the air felt heavier. I wanted to laugh it off, but the warmth in his tone made it impossible. Later that night, we got slammed again. A multi-car pileup. Ambulances streamed in one after the other. Together, we moved from one critical case to the next like a well-practiced team. I handed him instruments before he asked, anticipating his needs. He caught me when I nearly slipped on blood pooling near a gurney, steadying me with his hand on my waist for just a second too long before we dove back into the chaos. The adrenaline was high, and in the midst of that storm we became this unstoppable pair. Our communication effortless, our rhythm perfect. At 3 a.m., when the last of the trauma patients was stabilized and things finally quieted, I found him in the staff lounge, sitting with his head leaned back against the wall, eyes closed. I slipped in quietly, poured myself a lukewarm cup of coffee, and sat across from him. He cracked one eye open and smirked. "You look as tired as I feel," he said. I laughed, brushing a strand of hair out of my face, and replied, "That's what happens when you run marathons in the ER." For a few minutes, we just sat there, silence thick but comfortable. It wasn't like the awkward silence you share with strangers. It was the kind that comes when words aren't necessary. Then he said something that stuck with me. "I don't think I could have handled tonight without you." It wasn't the words themselves, but the way he said them. Low, sincere, almost vulnerable. My chest tightened, and I had to look away, afraid my face would give me away. I muttered something about just doing my job. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. When the sun began to rise and the night shift was finally over, we both walked out through the staff entrance. The cool morning air hit my skin, refreshing after hours in the stale hospital corridors. We stood there for a moment, neither of us rushing to our cars, just letting the dawn settle around us. He looked at me, his dark eyes soft, and for a heartbeat I thought he might say something. Something that would tip us over from professional respect into dangerous, uncharted territory. But instead, he just smiled. "See you next shift," he said, his voice carrying a weight I couldn't quite define. I drove home that morning with my chest buzzing, not from caffeine or exhaustion, but from the undeniable current between us. It wasn't a romance yet, not in the way people write about in novels, but it was the beginning of something. A connection forged under fluorescent lights, in blood-soaked gloves, in the wordless moments where two people lean on each other in the chaos of saving lives. And as much as I told myself to keep it professional, I couldn't deny that when the next shift came, I would be waiting for that spark all over again. I still remember the pit in my stomach the day I accidentally broke a piece of hospital equipment worth nearly $250,000. Nursing school teaches you so much about patient care, safety protocols, and teamwork, but they don't warn you how much pressure there is when you're surrounded by machines that cost more than you'll ever make in a few years of salary. This happened a few years ago when I was working in the ICU, one of the most high-stakes areas in the hospital, where patients rely on advanced technology to stay alive. The room was filled with ventilators, monitors, infusion pumps, and at the center of it all was this brand new intra-aortic balloon pump machine, which had just been delivered to our unit. It was shiny, intimidating, and something we were told to treat with extreme caution because the price tag on it was $250,000. I was still getting used to the equipment and had only handled it a couple of times during training, but that night it became part of my assignment. We had a patient with severe cardiogenic shock, and the doctor ordered the balloon pump to be set up immediately. My heart was pounding because I knew there was no margin for error. These machines weren't toys, they were lifelines, and the patient's survival depended on us getting it right. I carefully wheeled the device into the patient's room, checking every line, every connection, trying to recall the checklist from training. The room was tense, with the doctor giving quick instructions, respiratory therapy working on the ventilator, and me trying to juggle multiple responsibilities at once. The moment it happened is still crystal clear in my mind. I was adjusting the position of the balloon pump so I could connect it to the patient's arterial line. The machine was heavier than it looked, and as I tried to angle it closer to the bedside, one of the wheels caught on the cord of the IV pump. I didn't notice at first because I was focused on the tubing in my hands, but as soon as I pulled forward, the cord yanked tight, and the entire balloon pump tipped sideways. Time slowed down as I watched it fall, this massive piece of equipment crashing to the floor with a thud so loud it made everyone in the room freeze. The screen flickered, alarms went off, and just like that, the machine powered down completely. I felt like my soul left my body in that moment. The doctor whipped his head around and shouted, "What happened?" My face went hot, my hands shaking, and all I could say was, I think I broke it. The room turned chaotic, with staff rushing to grab the backup machine, the patient's condition worsening by the second because now we had lost precious time. 2 other nurses came to help stabilize the patient while respiratory therapy tried to silence the blaring alarms. I stood there in shock, my heart pounding in my ears, guilt wrapping around me like a vice. This wasn't a dropped syringe or a misplaced chart. This was $250,000 of life-saving equipment, ruined because I wasn't careful enough. The patient eventually got hooked up to the backup balloon pump, and thankfully they stabilized, but the atmosphere around me was heavy with tension. No one said anything to me right away because we were still in emergency mode, but I could feel the stares, the disappointment, the silent judgment. When the crisis passed and the patient was stable, the charge nurse pulled me aside. Her voice was calm but sharp, the kind of tone that tells you you're in serious trouble. She said, "Do you realize what just happened? That machine alone costs more than your entire annual salary several times over. This is going to have to be reported." My chest tightened so badly I thought I might faint. I kept apologizing, stammering, saying it was an accident, that I was trying to follow protocol, but my words felt hollow even to me. The paperwork that followed was brutal. An incident report, an equipment damage report, meetings with risk management, and eventually a sit-down with my manager where I had to recount every single detail of what led to the accident. I felt like I was under a spotlight, every misstep magnified, every choice questioned. My manager reminded me that this kind of mistake didn't just cost money, It could have cost a life. That part hit me harder than anything else. The realization that my clumsiness nearly jeopardized a patient's survival. In the days that followed, I carried so much shame I could barely look my coworkers in the eye. Some of them tried to reassure me, saying accidents happen, that the ICU is a pressure cooker where mistakes are bound to occur. But others weren't so forgiving. I overheard whispers in the break room, people saying things like, "She's the one who broke the balloon pump," like it was now my identity. Every time I walked past the empty space where the machine used to be, I felt that wave of guilt all over again. Eventually, the hospital absorbed the financial hit, insurance covered part of the replacement, and life moved on. But for me, that moment stayed etched in my memory. It taught me a lesson about awareness, about slowing down even in the most urgent situations, about respecting not just the cost of the equipment, but the responsibility that comes with handling it. I had to rebuild my confidence from the ground up, reminding myself that one mistake, no matter how big, didn't define my entire career.